Okay.
Yep, I'll click right now.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to this session of our technical development discussions. Today's topic will be on mapping tools in CIOC. And if you're familiar with the other sessions that we've had over the last few weeks, Kate will go through a presentation that you've hopefully had a chance to review. And she will go through what currently exists to help set some context, and then give a sense of where she sees this particular part of the software going with the redevelopment. Keeping in mind that the information that is going to be gathered during these discussions will be, any changes that come from these discussions will be implemented in year 2 of the development plan for our CIOC redevelopment. So that means that you would look to see some of these changes or enhancements in the software in the summer of 2012. So just to give you a sense of, I mean, it's an 18-month project. We're well underway. Kate and Chris are busy working on a lot of the foundational elements of the software to bring us up to current standards. So a lot of that work's going on right now. So we appreciate you coming and asking questions and thinking in particular today about the mapping tools and how they apply to your work. Hopefully we'll have some information that speaks to your location today, and you'll be able to connect with it and ask some questions if you have any. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Liz Gallagher, and I am the Vice President of CIOC this year and the Chair of the CIOC V3 Task Force. And that is the committee that has been struck to shepherd the development through the process in the next year and a half. We are committed to putting updates about the redevelopment as it goes on the CIOC discussion board. So if you visit that, you will see that there is this specific forum now that is for the CIOC V3 redevelopment. Feel free to post any questions there that you have, and also access it for updates, because we are trying to post information on that board so that people are aware of where we're at. So just a ground rule for today. We have the ability, you have the ability in front of you to post questions. There are 2 ways you can do this. You can either type your questions, and Kate will be able to see those questions, or you can raise your hand. There's a raise your hand feature, and you can do that and request to be unmuted. Now, Kate prefers that the questions be typed, because then she has a running log of the kinds of concerns that members have around this particular area. But either way, we do want your participation and your comments. So if you really want to get something in, you can raise your hand and type a question, or raise your hand and ask to be unmuted. Either way, we do want to get your feedback. So that's it for now. I will turn the session over to Kate, and there will be time at the end of the session for any extra questions that you have around what Kate has presented. So over to you, Kate.
Hi, I'm just going to start by asking Laura to make me presenter, please. Or I can make myself presenter. Let me see, I'll do change presenter. There we go. Okay, so I'll have to ask extra patience today because I have a brand new computer that I've only just started setting up over the weekend, and so it's not the way I'm used to it, and things are not where they're supposed to be, so a little extra patience today, hopefully. I'm going to be using, because my own test site isn't set up yet, I'm going to be using our public CIOC test site as well as the Hamilton public site. So that would be for publicly available features. They have their mapping tools on publicly. This particular session, for those of you who have attended a number of them, this particular session is really aimed to orient you to the new features, and we don't have a lot of information on changes that we need to make, so that varies from session to session. Sometimes we know a lot about what we need to do, and sometimes we don't. So we will have an open discussion at the end where we would really like to find out from you if there are anything that you've come up with that we need to do or changes that we need to make, additional features you'd like to see, because really we don't have a good idea at this point because we haven't had a lot of feedback from our members in this area about what else you'd like to see. So I'm going to make sure that everyone has a basic understanding of the tools that we have already. And then most of what we're going to do is open discussion where you can let me know if you have any ideas or concerns or changes you'd like to see. All right? Okay. Can everyone see my screen? Oh, I don't have recording set up on this computer. Laura, do you have recording set up?
Yep, you're good to go. I'm recording.
Okay, good. Because I haven't set up recording on this new computer. Awesome. All right. So, a little bit about mapping tools in CIOC. The first mapping that we ever had in CIOC was just a link underneath an address record like this one. Here, this is an image of Google Maps where if you clicked it, it would bring up a map in an external service. This started out with MapQuest, and then eventually we brought in Google Maps, and then now we allow you to have multiple different what we call mapping systems, which are links to different external services. Some people even use their regions mapping systems to provide this link. That was our first mapping tool. And one of the things that's really important to understand is how this original mapping tool, which was just a clickable link, differs from the true mapping tools in CIOC, where you can actually generate a map in CIOC, position an organization on a map, and so on. So there is a really distinct line between this original tool, which was simply a link underneath the address, and all of the advanced mapping tools that we have where you can actually generate a pinpoint on a map right in the software. And there's often still a lot of confusion about why, when I place a marker on a map in the software, doesn't this map link change, or vice versa, because they are very independent things. In 2009, we added the Google Maps API into CIOC. So that's our true mapping tools where you can actually generate a map in CIOC, position one or more organizations or programs on a map, and so on. Those are all our Google Maps API tools. So we frequently had questions about, can I use MapQuest with this, because they can do the MapQuest link in our old mapping system, but the answer is no. So this is a Google service that we use to do the mapping. It's only Google. It's not configured to work with any other kind of system. There are a number out there. There's Bing Maps, there's Yahoo Maps, there's MapQuest, of course, and a number of others. Some of them provide APIs like this, and some of them don't, but we only work with the Google Maps API. One of the good things about working with that API is it is free. It is generally ad-free, although obviously it says it's powered by Google and so on, and the terms of service say that potentially in the future they have control over whether they do any kind of advertising on this service. But it is a free service, so we don't have to pay anything extra in order to make use of this. We do have to provide a public service in exchange for using these free tools. So anyone who wishes to make use of any of our Google Maps API tools has to offer at least some kind of public service in their site, whether that be search results for the public or allowing the public to position their organization on a map in the feedback form. There's lots of different ways that you can offer that service, but in order to legitimately use Google Maps, that is a requirement. Now the nice thing is that Google Maps permission is by domain, so anyone using a CIOC.ca name, we know that there's lots of aspects of public access to our mapping tools for all of our CIOC.ca sites, so it's less of a concern. For those of you who have your own domain name, your own site, It's more of a concern that you ensure that you do have some kind of a public service available if you want to make use of these tools. At this point, I do believe there is an expectation that when you send your information to 211ontario.ca, for those who do, that you would provide this mapping geocoding information along with the information that you provide to 211ontario.ca. So any of that work that you do in your database locally then is also used for the Google Maps tools that 211ontario.ca uses, which are separate from what we do. Okay, so there's two major things that we do with the Google Maps API. One is determining the longitude and latitude. You may hear us call it geocoding of a record, so that's determining where in the world that particular location is positioned in terms of longitude and latitude. And the second thing we do is using that longitude and latitude information, we place one or more records on a map that the API generates for us. So we would tell Google where these markers are supposed to go, and their programming interface then puts those markers on a map where they provide the tiles and all of the tools for zooming and showing satellite and all of those neat things that Google Maps does. Having access to the geocoding information allows us to build some of our own tools as well, including searching and sorting by geopositioning. So where a record is located can be used to either find a record. So if I say I want something within 5 kilometers of this postal code, that's a geopositioning search. Or you can sort by proximity. So how close is a record to a given position? So those tools are ones that we build ourselves based on this geocoding, the latitude and longitude that we get from Google. So there are 5 types of these mapping tools, the Google API tools that we have in the software, and I'm going to make sure everyone's aware of all 5 of them. So geocoding tool per record is on your regular update form. It's also on your feedback form if you choose to add it there. It allows you to choose what information to use to map the record, the site address, intersection, a manual mapping where you can drag the pin around, or not mapping it at all. If you do not have this on your form, you would need to go into your view setup and add it, and the field is called geocode info, I believe. So I'm going to go into an update record. It should be on this form. Not my normal test site, but we'll cross our fingers that it's on the form. There we go. So this is what the update form looks like. The feedback form is very, very similar. It allows you to say map by the intersection field if you have a value in the intersection field, and map by the site address field. You can see I can switch between them, and the marker jumps from one spot to another. If I choose manual map placement, or I actually pick up the marker and drag it, it will automatically switch to manual map placement. That's for cases where the automatic service that determines where a marker should be positioned is wrong, and you need to adjust it. So we do find that some areas, especially rural areas, have more trouble getting an accurate placement using the automatic tools. Sometimes other services like MapQuest might have a better positioning for that record, but because you don't get to choose another service for this tool, you have to use manual placement in order to make the correction. Sometimes you can start out with site address or intersection in order to get something close to where you need, and then drag it to the actual location that you need it to be. You can zoom in and zoom out in order to help. If it was really far away from where you wanted, you can zoom out to get into the general location where you need it, and then zoom back in again. I'm using the scroll wheel on my mouse to do my zooming. You can also use plus and minus. And you can write some notes. So if you ended up having to do a manual map placement, you may want to write some notes to tell you why. So positioning using site address. Often if you need to use intersection because there's a privacy issue where the address is not publicly available, but you still want it to map in some way, you can map using a major intersection, and you might want to make a note saying, I used intersection because the address is private, and so on, to give you an idea as a data manager about why it is the way it is. You'll notice that there are a number of map markers as well, the default always being the first one, which is red. If you choose, you can create multiple map categories, and each of these markers would then represent a category. For example, here in the Hamilton site, I'm going to go back to my total list here. They have their faith groups and places of worship all have a marker of green. So in this case, the one red is not an actual church or synagogue or what have you. It's a program within that. So this program has a regular red marker, but all of the actual church and faith group locations have a green marker that make it very easy when they're looking at a number of different services on a map for them to distinguish between, say, a faith group and something else. They also, for instance, have markers for their home child care registry and separate markers for their licensed child care programs. So whenever they're looking at a map of a number of different kinds of services, that legend allows them to show and hide just specific types of services based on that classification. So if I remove other services because I only want to see faith groups, the red marker disappears from the map. Zoom in so we can actually see some of these. And if I click it again, then the red marker would return to the map. In this case, I don't see where the red marker is. Here. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in a little farther. Number 6. So as I zoom in, in this case, they're both at the same location, I think. As I zoom in, if I have these large white blobs representing multiple, they'll separate out into their individual categories. If I remove everything green, you'll see I'm only left with the red marker. So that's the purpose of those categories. And you can use them or not, and you can make the categories be anything you like, whatever works for you locally. The challenge is that every record can only belong to one category, so you can't have it be both a faith group and a child care center. And hopefully your programs are adequately divided that you wouldn't have that kind of overlap in a single record. But if you did, we have no way of accommodating that. One map marker per record. So that's our per record geocoding tool. Next, and this is mainly used for someone who has not done any mapping in the past, we have our bulk geocoding tool, where instead of having to go in and update every record individually, I can go to my search results. Pardon me. Go back. I can check all. I can say update geocoding, and I can change the map marker or change the geocoding type or anything that I would like to do. So if I just want to change the map marker because I've identified that all the records that I picked here, instead of having a red marker, I wanted them to have a blue marker, then I could just change the map marker and leave the current geocoding as it is. So whatever the current setting is, it would leave it alone. I can change the setting, obviously. So this is don't update geocoded location, only change map PIM color. I can use the current record setting, but ask Google to confirm that that is correct. So it would resend the site address information or the intersection information to Google and ask it to refresh that geocoding. I can say I don't want to map it, and I can also change whatever the setting is currently. So if all these records, I wanted to change them from whatever they are right now to map by intersection, I could do it that way. So that's our bulk geocoding tool. I'll just leave it to say current so you can see what it looks like. Okay? So it's gone through any of them that it actually sent to Google and got new information. It will say updated. And in this case, it says unchanged. And very likely, this was an unmappable record, and it is still an unmappable record, meaning it didn't have an address, potentially. Okay? So that's our bulk geocoding tool. This isn't something that you would need to use unless you had a lot of new records that weren't geocoded, you've never used the mapping tools in your software before, and so on. Okay, our proximity searching tools are next. Oh, I've got a question. Pardon me, I didn't even see it. Okay. Got a question from Jennifer. How can we get the street map and bus notes to work on this map? Okay, so I assume you're meaning the additional tools that where if you actually go to Google Maps by itself, there's tools that we don't have in our maps. Is that what you mean, Jennifer? Okay, so that's actually the one really big enhancement that I have in my list is we are using an old version of the API. And to get access to some of those features, we're going to have to do a big old upgrade to the latest version of the Google Maps API. We still are never going to have all of the features that are available if you go and get the latest, greatest direct from Google. But certainly if we are as up-to-date as possible in our version of the API, then we're going to have access to more tools than we do now. So that, particularly the street view that you're talking about, Jennifer, and I think the bus notes are part of the version 3 API that we want to upgrade to. Okay. All right. So proximity tool, I'm going to walk you through a little bit about our existing proximity tools. Currently, this type of searching is only available in 2 places. One is our advanced search form, and one is our public child care search form. In both these cases, it's kind of a large and bulky tool, and so we know that we need to think about that before we do anything further in terms of public access to our searching tool. But our current one looks like this. So you can see very, very large. You type in your address or postal code. I can even type in a landmark like Jackson Square, Hamilton. And optionally, I can either hit enter or click the magnifying glass. It'll map my location. So there are 2 things I can do with this proximity searching. One is sort by nearest, which is the default. So my search results will show the nearest items to my location higher in my results list. And I can actually limit to things within a particular distance. So if I say I want to limit to things within 20 kilometers of that particular location, it will only show me records in that circumference. So it's a circular, so it's not a driving direction. It's not 20 kilometers driving distance. It's 20 kilometers the crow flies, so that everyone understands that it's not the same as driving distance at all. Optionally, I can include records that are not mappable. So this only applies if I'm restricting within a specific distance. If I include unmappable records, that will allow me to get records that don't have a physical location but might still qualify for that service area. So it's an important thing to consider when you're doing this search is whether or not you want to include services that don't have a physical location or are unmappable for some reason. I'm going to perform this search. I'm going to map my results here. You'll see that a special pin appears in the middle of the map. I'm going to zoom in a little so it's separated. You can see it sitting on Jackson Square there, a little house with a star on it. That would be the location that I had mapped. And if I zoom out, everything that appears on the map is whatever is in this database within a 20-kilometer circumference of, or diameter actually. It's 20 kilometers out point to point in any direction, so I guess 40 kilometers. Having radius, yeah, I'm having a circumference of this. Radius of 20 kilometers, circumference of 40, or diameter of 40 kilometers from, for this circle, right? So anything in this circle 20 kilometers out from this distance point to point would show up in my search. And things that appear first in my list should be the closest to my point. So if I go through my list, you'll see it's going to start with everything close to the top. If I go down to the bottom of my list, it'll have unmapped records which are not positionable in my search. So, and at the very bottom of my list are things that are the farthest away from my point. You'll notice as I move around the map that some things are turning white. That's because they're not current screen. So as I move around and make things visible or not visible, more things will turn white or not white as I move them in and out of my screen. This is called the viewport. So that's the basics of proximity searching. We know a few things about what's wrong with what we do now, in that it's too big. We have too much information. So if we wanted to, say, add this to our basic search page, we probably wouldn't pre-map it the way that we do now. We would default to a number of kilometers. We would make it a lot simpler so that all the person had to do was type in their location and have it show things nearest first or within a particular distance, without them having to fiddle with it too much or having it take up this much space on the search screen. Our map results tool is obvious. That's what I was just showing you now. So for most types of searches, doesn't apply to browse by searches, most types of searches you can do a map result. And that will attempt to map everything in your search results. If it is geocoded, again, so just because there's a map in a record, a map link in the address of the record doesn't mean it's geocoded. It doesn't mean it's going to show up on this map. It has to be geocoded to show up on this map. And as I indicated earlier, the large white bubbles indicate that there's a number of services in a very close distance. So here I have 17. That means there's 17 services. I click on it, it will zoom in and separate out some of those services. If there's a small number of services, rather than zooming in, it will just pop out a bubble listing those small number of services and showing you the pin color of each of those services. You can see here I have one that's pink and two that are red. In terms of how this tool works, in navigating the map, zooming in and out, and so on, much of this is under the control of the Google Maps API. So all of our ability to zoom in and out, the sliders at the top that we have here, our home positioner and moving around the map, the map, satellite, and hybrid, those are all part of what Google provides. Whereas the ability to size the map, where it is on our page, so you can see with the scroll bar I can move this around and size it to my screen. I can also switch it to the bottom. Those aspects are controlled by us. So that's part of what we've written into our software, is the ability to move the map around, decide where it's positioned, and so on. We've also added the close button and the legend, which indicates what these various map markers are for. So this part that you see at the bottom is under control by us, whereas this menu at the top and side are controlled by Google. So we don't set the functionality for that. In terms of how the map markers are positioned, what they look like, that's all in our control as well. So we decided what the map pins were going to look like, and our code determines how to position groups like this, where we have a number in a close geographic area. By default, most mapping systems will just throw the map pins on there. But because it's not uncommon for people to have search results up to in the thousands in CIOC databases, that really made the maps unusable. And we've mapped up to 10,000 records without issue because of the fact that we do this clustering instead of showing the individual map pins. So that's part of what we control versus what Google controls. So we don't have full choice about what we can do, but we do have some ability to enhance that the use of that API and make our own tools on top of what Google makes available to us. Finally, we have our print map tool, which is really similar to the map results tool, but it's intended for print output, so it is different. I'm going to check a few here. I'm going to use our viewport tool to select a number of records. So I'm going to zoom into an area here. Say I only want to map these records here in downtown Hamilton. So I'll do check in viewport. Got my new result set. You'll see now I only have a very small number of records, only what was visible in my screen at the time I clicked Check and Viewport. I'm going to send these to our Print Map tool. You can send a maximum of 99 records to this tool. You pick the orientation of your paper. So if the way your records are positioned means you'll get a better result on landscape paper, you can flip it and vice versa. I'm just going to choose a regular letter paper portrait orientation. And you can see that this is a much different looking map. It's sized to hopefully fit well on one letter piece of paper and includes a legend printed out with it so that we can see which of these markers mean what. So like, again, the white marker means multiple items at the same location. But unlike our previous one, you can see I can still zoom out and so on and reposition my map even here. If I don't like the way that it's positioned it, I can actually do an adjustment before I go to print it. Unlike on the search results map, these numbers do not mean how many are at that spot. These numbers tie to a number here so that you can tell by looking at this list of records where these items are on the map. So if I find number 7, that represents this GU 0006 record right there. Okay? And that holds true even for our white markers. It's a number that represents something in the legend. It's not the number of items at that location. So that's all we have right now for our current tools. Does anyone have any questions about our current tools before I talk about the very brief list, wish list that we have? Okay. So what is it that we want to do? So the first one, Jennifer already brought up a point that led me to this, is we need to upgrade our Google Maps API version that we use. We're already running into some challenges in Internet Explorer in particular where we're getting strange script timeouts and other issues, likely exacerbated by the fact that we're using an older deprecated version of the Google Maps API. We know that by upgrading the version we're using, we'll get a more efficient tool, proper support, because you can't get good support on a deprecated tool. Deprecated meaning they're not officially supporting it or using it anymore. They want you to use the new version. And we would get access to new features such as Street View, which Jennifer mentioned, and mobile browser support. So there's a lot of good reasons for us to make the investment to upgrade our use of Google Maps to the latest version. We also know that, as I mentioned earlier, we need to do some work in order to make our geo-positioning searches, or proximity searches, if you prefer, available on other parts of our public searches, so our basic search page, for example. And we know that when we do that, we need to think about a better way to display that to the public that doesn't take up so much space, is simpler to use. We know that our print map tool, the one that I just showed you, really lacks information. There's no way to say include a phone number or an email address or any other kind of information that you might want to have that goes along with this map. All you can do is print the record number and the organization name, and you have no control other than that over what information you might like to include in this report. So that's something we are aware of. We also know we have no mapping support whatsoever in the volunteer software, which is something that likely needs correction. There's lots of ways we could do this. We can map by the location of the organization, or within the volunteer opportunity there's a separate location field, and we could also do some work to change that location field and make it possible to map that location field if it happens to be different from the location of the posting agency. What we do need to think about, which is different from what we do in the CIC software, is what will we do when there are multiple locations? So when we think about adding it to the volunteer software, we're going to have the added consideration of a single record that may need to be positioned at multiple points. And that may be something that also comes up with the community information, because we do have people doing mega records, let's say a listing of all the schools for a particular school board in a single record. And if they do that, we don't have any way for that to map against all of the locations, and it gets quite tricky. Other than that, we really need to know from you about what you're doing and what you would like to see. I have a final slide here, which is just an FYI slide that you can look at offline that tells you a little bit about some of the gotchas in using the tools and how to set it up. So if you're new to the mapping tools, I do encourage you to read this last slide because it gives you a little bit of information about getting that up and running if you haven't done that prior. So I'm going to unmute everyone now. Give me a moment. Again, everyone's unmuted. Be conscious of the fact that you're unmuted. And really, at the moment, I'm open for whatever questions. Oh, I see Jennifer has a question. My thing is, no, I don't. It's all answered. Okay, so any opinions, questions, comments, information, anything that I can give you. And if you have nothing, that's fine too. We really don't know what, if anything, people still need. All right, I have a question from Pam. I'm using the other locations field, and I would love to be able to map multiple locations in a record. Okay, so you're using, we have a field in our database that's called other locations, so that's a pretty new field in CIOC. And you would like to be able to have each of those additional locations mapped so that it could come up in proximity searches and so on. Correct? That's certainly something that we can look into. Yeah.
Kate, it's Lynn. I just love the idea of being able to map volunteer opportunities. I think that's so great, and I can picture lots of uses in our center of the ability to portray in a map various opportunities. And if we also have the ability to map bus routes on that, my gosh, we're going to be so far ahead of what we are now in our ability to visually represent where people can help. If you think it would be helpful, Kate, I can certainly ask the volunteer module users group at a next meeting whether how they feel about that and whether they would have need of the ability to map multiple locations per record if you felt that feedback would be helpful.
Yeah, that would be very helpful. I think that, yeah, that would be very helpful. In terms of bus routes, so there's two.
I've done a test.
Oh, Chris is, okay, go ahead, Chris.
So I'm using Google's most basic example of using the API, going to the same location and comparing against what's on maps.google.ca. What I see is that, and I can't show you this right now because I took a minute to get here, so I don't have to share it.
So the bus stop that Chris sees on his map, we see bus stops now, but you can't actually look up which route they're on.
So when you, in Google Maps, if you hover over the bus route, it gives you a tooltip about the bus route, and if you click on it, it has a pop-up that says which buses show up there.
At that stop.
And some of them even have, like if you click the number, it'll tell you what the schedule is.
Are. Oh, that's so neat.
But that's not included in the default stuff from Google Maps. So I don't know if that's something that needs to be enabled that is there. But in terms of, at a minimum, the graphics showing the bus stops will be there. And
we have the graphics showing the bus stops now, but you can't do anything with them. And then it looks like the new version. At minimum, you can click on the bus stop. It'll show you which route stop there. No, that isn't part of
all we're seeing is the image for the bus stop being
So we'd have to do more research about the bus route. But that said, I was going to say, because we have a bus routes field in the community information software. And so potentially we need to find a way to make better use of that, maybe in the volunteer software where you're mapping by the organization's same address. Right now I know I've used it a number of times where you can do a search by bus route and show all of the organizations that fall along that bus route and map it. So certainly if we were able to leverage that field, so that special CIOC field that records the bus route, we may be able to leverage it that way, even if we can't through the Google Maps API. But we'd have to do more research to ensure that we know what we can use and what we can't. What we do have now, at least, is that it shows where the bus routes are around the location.
The other thing is that there's a Google logo in the bottom left corner of every map that shows up in the API. If you click that logo, it will take you directly to the Google Maps API.
So
Right.
I just did that, you can see.
And so
When I
then,
click powered by Google.
yeah, so it should show up in more or less the same location. So when you click on it, you go there.
And it did.
Right.
So,
And then you can see, and you should be able to click on the bus route there. There's a bus. So you click on it, and so that information is available. So it might
train. But yeah.
it might be that we need to have some kind of prompt that says, you need to go into, click to go into Google Maps and see bus route information.
Ah, right. Some kind of navigation or tip.
Right. So right now, the only reason that I know that is because I've spent a lot of time with the Google Maps API and know what is showing up on that map. I mean, when I put it in, I understood what everything that shows up in your map is there and why it's there. We potentially need to prompt the public, and not every member is going to be fully trained, and every person everywhere is going to be fully trained. So
we can add things onto the map. So when I was showing earlier that we had some of the buttons that Google put in and some of the buttons that we put in ourselves, so we do have the ability to add extra information on top of the map, buttons, links, graphics, and so on, to try and give more information about that. So, and really, we don't know all of the stuff that the new version does. We've done some research to find out what's new in the 3.0 version, but we don't necessarily know everything that's new that we can make use of. So you have to see. But this is the pretty neat stuff that can be available, and as I click on that, it'll actually show me all of the times of that bus route. It's up to the local municipality or city that's running those buses to provide this information. So not every municipality or city has this level of information available from Google, but more of them are making that available.
That's amazing. That's yeah, it's just such a great asset to the community to be able to offer this. Now, do you, when you talked about proximity searching, that perhaps bringing that into the basic search page, do you see this as envision it being an optional thing for members to introduce to the search page, or just simply a new addition to the standard package of things that people can search for?
It would always be optional. So we're now at the point that on the community information side, basically every single thing on that basic search page is optional. Everything. You can even take the keyword search off. So that would be the mode we would go under for sure. It's always optional, and people would have to decide that it was something we wanted to offer, in particular because not all of our members even have mapping tools enabled. So it would have to be a decision that each person makes of whether they want to make that available or not.
Somebody's phone is ringing. Any other questions for Kate and Chris about the mapping tools?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. Let me just bring up my questions panel, I think. Oh, no, I think I've answered all of these. Okay.
So regarding the ability for the public to search by proximity, it's possible. There are APIs that, if say they're using their phone, that it would be possible to pull their current geographic location out with the user's permission. So that could come into how we how we get the location.
And that's, again, that's part of the new 3.0 tools is they have better built-in ability to do, to sort of try and auto-detect where the user is. There are official browser protocols now, right?
Yeah.
Chris, do you remember what they're called?
It's W3C.
Yeah, there's now some official protocols about how sites can find out where you are. I mean, obviously there's privacy concerns there, but in the end, it's what users have said they're okay with communicating. So it's not like we're prying out information that they're not broadcasting. But for those users who do choose to make that information available, it can automatically detect where that user is and make suggestions based on their location. So, and all these tools are available. It's a question of how beneficial is it? And I worry about things with the auto detect where you are. One, I worry that it will creep some users out from a privacy perspective. Two, I would think that many users will block it, and so it's a questionable benefit.
On phones specifically,
yeah,
people will be used to it because it happens all the time on the phones, and I don't think they'll block it.
Yeah.
On the phone.
It is different on phones. People have an expectation of the where am I thing happening all the time on their phone.
But I mean, people are already getting used to, and you're maybe not less used to it because you block JavaScript. But if you go to a website and there's ads down the side, often those ads are targeted at your location. Maybe not specifically other than knowing the name of your town and inserting, find whatever you're looking for in
your town.
Your town.
Yeah.
So it's, people are already getting, that's already occurring. So.
Now, while on the topic of phones, have you had to consider, have you had to make any special considerations for the fact that people may be looking at our databases through their BlackBerry?
Yeah. So we have members. We actually have had at least one member where their main use case was on a BlackBerry, where it was an internal site, and all of the people who would be accessing it for their work would be doing so through BlackBerry. So in that case, we worked with them to set up a design template that worked on the screen resolution for a BlackBerry and so on. And the mapping tools actually, we have tested on iPhones and things, and they do work. So they're cramped, but they do, even now, they do work. But certainly when we get into some later sessions about user interface, we'll be specifically talking about mobile support because it is a growing need. And what we would actually like to do is detect that the person is on a mobile browser and automatically choose a different way of displaying the site based on the fact that that user is on a mobile browser. So definitely that's a huge consideration these days and something we have run into already.
Amazing. Amazing where the world is going. Any other questions or comments? Any questions, comments, anything at all?
There's a hand raised. Okay, well, so someone has their hand raised. Go ahead and talk or pose the question if you can't talk, Diane.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can you tell me the pros and cons if we've got a record geomapped of using the previous system for MapQuest and Google? Is there any need for us to even use those any longer, or how are people handling those, having 3 different mapping systems available?
So I'll let other people comment as well. From my perspective, if you're displaying the map in the record, so we have a special field called site address mapped that allows you, when you view the record details, let me close this map. When you view the record details, it would show next to this a map right next to the address. If that's the version you're showing on all your pages, you don't really need these links.
So there is one reason why you would want those links.
Yeah.
And that is if you have a user who's coming to your site and doesn't have JavaScript enabled,
yeah,
then they may have JavaScript enabled for Google Maps specifically because it's a common site and they would want to use it. Because you can pick per site you want to run. So they may have JavaScript disabled for your site, but not for Google Maps. If they click the Google Maps, then they would go there. And I think MapQuest used to not require at least very much in the way of JavaScript. I think that, I don't know if that's changed because frankly, I haven't been on MapQuest in probably 3 years.
Yeah. So on the plus side, it's just a matter of a checkbox to do this link. So it doesn't really require a lot of extra effort to do that. In terms of whether it's extra, as Chris says, if that person has JavaScript disabled for your site, which for myself personally, I browse the web with JavaScript disabled all the time, and I only specifically turn it on for some sites if I need it. So for me, going to a site the first time, I would have JavaScript disabled. I wouldn't even see that map. So that link would potentially be useful to me because I wouldn't even know that I was missing the map.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
So it sort of sounds like a preference issue in terms of what you would like.
The thing that's important to understand is that they are separate. They don't interact with each other. One of the things I mentioned in my last slide of the PowerPoint is this Google Map. If I click it, you'll see that it sends the full address to Google. Okay, so that's what it's sending is the exact address as you put it in the record. So that means if you've manually placed that marker or they don't have or you don't have full information, that may not go to the right place. But one of the things you can set up is change your Google Map system instead of using the address to use the longitude and latitude. And I do, as I say, I mentioned that on the last slide. If you want to learn how to use, make a mapping system that uses the same information so that if you decide intersection, you decide site address, you decide manual placement, that whatever you pick would also apply to this link, I can give you the information on how to set up your map link to work that way as well. So instead of sending address, it'll send the latitude and longitude. So you can configure it that way if you like.
Okay.
Question from Deborah. Oh, poor Deborah has to leave. There's a fire alarm going off in her building. That's not good. Jennifer's asking, are we planning to refresh all our geocoding when the new API is installed? No, you won't need to do that at all, Jennifer. So this is the tool to do geocoding, but it's not going to change the latitude and longitude. So if you've already determined the latitude and longitude of a record, you will not have to geocode it again. There'll be no need for that. But it will really just change how our tools work and hopefully make them faster and the mapping tools nicer with more features. Faster would be good. If you get annoyed with the script timeouts of the Google Maps now, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, if you pull up too many, if you're trying to map too many, it certainly throws the database into a bit of a spin.
Yeah, we've noticed particularly, as I said earlier, that Internet Explorer 7.
Internet Explorer is just any
sometimes
Internet Explorer. It's too slow. The JavaScript, let alone the network stuff. The JavaScript is slow. 8 is fine, but 6 and 7. If you're using Internet Explorer 6 and 7, and you have any option to use anything other than Internet Explorer 6 and 7, please. Do yourself a favor.
So we can't control that for the public. So it's certainly something we hope that by moving to 3, the fact that Google Maps is more efficient in those newer versions will also help with the fact that some of these older browsers are so slow with their JavaScript that it can cause things to time out. Because we don't have any control over Google Maps. I mean, if they go down or they're slow, what are we going to do to control Google, right? So that's the unfortunate disadvantage of relying on a service like this, is you really don't have any control over availability or timing or anything like that.
Any other questions for Kate and Chris on the topic of mapping? Okay. Anything else you want to add, Kate, that that you haven't added so far that's occurred to you?
No, as I said, with this one, I'm not sure where else we're going other than the few things we've added. We really have put in a lot already, so I'm not sure what else we need to do other than the couple of things that I've mentioned. So if anyone thinks of anything, you can certainly let us know.
Absolutely. Post it to the board. Ask your questions. All of that is very helpful in this process. And as always, Kate, I always find I learn so much more. I know these aren't training calls, but I find my general experience is that I realize I'm not using my tools, existing tools, to their fullest potential when I see how much it actually can do for us. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has that experience. So just sort of as a note as well, please do notice on our forum we have something called CIOC for lunch that we're doing on the third Thursday of every month. And if you have other things that occur to you when you're in these sessions, if you want to post them on the board or you want to ask a question during a CIOC for lunch general forum, and then we will make sure that information goes to Kate and Chris. Just as a member of the task force, I want to remind you that we want to encourage you to communicate with us in any way that you like. If you want to give me a call, if you want to give Laura a call, if you want to put an email on the forum, if you want to join our general discussion on the third Thursday, please do think about, you know, as you sometimes after you go to a session, you might think, oh, but it would be nice if we could do that. What about that thing? Please do add your comments, because Kate and Chris will be collecting all of the requirements over the next couple of months, and then there'll be, Kate, do you want to talk about the ranking thing that will be happening, the exercise that will be happening soon?
Yeah. So what we'll do at the end of all of these sessions, and taking all the comments that we get, is we're going to put together a large prioritizing system. I expect something will actually have it be relatively automated, where we'll have a full list of all the features by category, and you can provide a level of importance for each of them. So, you know, this is not important to me, this is a little bit important to me, this is very important to me, this is critical to me, for each of the items. Each member would have an opportunity to express their own need locally, so that we can then take all of those comments together and determine what is most needed for the next round that we do. Now, although technically our next release, we talked about it being, you know, the middle of 2012, the reality is we'll probably have something a little bit closer to our regular release schedule, so it's actually likely that we may have some of the features earlier. You know, 3 to 4 months apart, we might have small releases of features and try and peck through our list. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have to wait until 2012 to see some of these. You know, some of them may be this fall or earlier than that. So we'll use whatever people prioritize, and the funds that are available left in the grant after we do a number of items that are sort of the core part of the grant, and we'll get through what we can. And anything that doesn't get done in this round of work still remains as part of the regular enhancement work that's always being done to CIOC. So if it doesn't get chosen for what we're doing during this grant, that doesn't mean it's not going to get done. It just means it's likely to be something on a more long-term list for us.
Excellent. Okay.
Okay.
Well,
that's all. I expected this to be a short session. So.
But very informative as always, and I think that, yeah, I think that these tools and the enhancements that are coming on the mapping are going to be fantastic. And I'll happily announce that to the volunteer module users too, that they will be getting those mapping tools in the next year and a half or so, and that'll be very exciting news.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you everyone for attending this session today. As I said, you know, keep looking on that forum list for other sessions you want to join, and send us any questions or comments you have. Thank you so much for your participation today.